Herbert, and this was, I think, what won them the game. It was very unexpected, I think, by most people. He had 25 out of 34 attempts, 25 completions out of 34 attempts for 318 yards. They came out of the gate throwing the ball. All right, welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. In this episode, we will be covering two games, the game on Thursday night between the Cowboys and the Eagles, and the game on Friday night in Brazil between the Chiefs and the Chargers. So let's get started. This will be the first time I've done this post-game look, and we'll be seeing how this works. I'm always kind of tinkering with it till I get it how I like it, but we're going to start with this. So in this first game between Dallas and the Eagles, Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, the Eagles did win, much tighter game than predicted. Philadelphia beat Dallas 24-20. So now you have, this was a divisional game as well, so you've got, obviously this being the first game, but Philadelphia 1-0 overall. It was a home game for the Eagles, so they're 1-0 at home, and they're 1-0 in the division. So good start for them. It was a good game for Dallas. Of course, they lost, so how well they play doesn't matter, but they did hang in there with Philadelphia for that pretty much the most of the game. So we want to look at the stats in this game. This was not a game really for the quarterbacks too much. Surprisingly, Dak Prescott only had 188 yards passing. He had 21 out of 34 for 188 yards. Not what I was thinking. I was thinking they would have to throw the ball a lot, and he'd probably have a 300-yard game, but that's not what happened. Even though I know Philadelphia has a very tough defense, but I thought that was the only way they were going to run or play in this game. But they did end up rushing for 119 yards between, interestingly, Williams had 15 attempts for 54 yards, only like a 3.6 average. Now, Miles Sanders was 4 rushes for 53 yards. He had one big run for 49, so really the other 3 was 3 rushes for 1 yard. So, and unfortunately for Sanders, he did have a fumble. So that really cost Dallas in this game. So those two are the leading rushers, and you're going to find this interesting as we go through the rest of the games on who's the leading rusher for all the other teams when we look at this. So those are your leading rushers. It looks like obviously Williams is a primary rusher. He rushed 15 times. He had 2 receptions too, so he touched the ball 17 times in this game. Definitely the leading running back. Bludit was not even playing, so he didn't even count. As far as receivers go, it was CeeDee Lamb. This was Pickens coming in, and we'd see how he would do, but it really was still CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb did have 7 receptions, but he had 13 targets, and he had 2 drops. They were tough catches. Something he could have caught, though, really cost them the game. In the end, they were trying to move down the field, and he just could not make the receptions, and it was tough for Dallas. But he was the only one really that had any good numbers here. Like I said, 7 receptions for 110 yards. Ferguson had 5, the tight end. Ferguson had 5 receptions for 23 yards. And Pickens had 3 receptions for 30 yards. That's okay for him, but really there were only 21 receptions. So obviously CeeDee Lamb's seeing 33% of the targets. Yeah, and receptions, getting 33% of the receptions. So he's definitely the one on the team. Pickens is somebody I was looking at, but we're going to have to see an improvement. I really do think Prescott seriously looks only for Lamb, or almost exclusively to Lamb, and, it's hard to get him off of him. Now, when we're looking at the Eagles, again, Jalen Hurts only threw for 152 yards. really good rate. He 19 out of 23 in the passing, but only 152 yards. So only 6.6 yards per pass attempt, not really that much. Now, here's what I was talking about. This is the first we're going to see here. But when it comes to the rushing game, Saquon Barkley led the team in attempts with 18. He only had 60 yards, though, for a 3.3 average. Jalen Hurts had 14 rushes for 62 yards. So he led in the rushing department, had 4.4 yards per carry. He had 2 TDs and Barkley had 1. So they did get their touchdowns on the ground. There was no passing touchdowns for Hurts. So if you had him in your fantasy team, he made up for what he lacked in the yardage. Passing, he made up in rushing yards and in the 2 touchdowns that he had. So that really saved his game. But 152 yards is not what you wanted to see. And there was a lot of talk about increasing the passing game, but it really didn't happen. He was sacked 1 time. Now, when it comes to receiving, Dallas Goedert, the tight end, led the team with 7 receptions for 44 yards. Interestingly, their number 1 receiver, Brown, only had 1 catch for 8 yards. Saquon Barkley was the number 2 guy, though, with 4 receptions for 24 yards. So he touched the ball 22 times in this game. So definitely the guy they're going to, except for Hurts in this game. He can throw the ball, but he's not a timing guy, it seems to be. And if the guy's not open, he looks around. It's kind of like Mahomes. We'll talk about him later. But he ends up just taking off, and he picks up the yardage on the ground, and it killed Dallas the entire game. Him getting out of that pocket and making some yardage. So it was tough for them. So those are your leaders in the game. Now, when we're looking at all-time stats and stuff like that between the 2 teams, as we talked about this when I did the pregame, but right now, all-time in the NFL, this is the only one we're going to really talk about that's all-time. Cam Newton's number 1 as far as quarterbacks for rushing TDs with 75. Josh Allen is second with 65, and Jalen Hurts went into the game with 55. Now hasn't been in the league as long as Josh Allen, but he had 2 more touchdowns rushing in this game, and they weren't from the tush push either. They were from farther out. So he's up to 57. So Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are really on the trail of Cam Newton to break the all-time NFL record for TDs by a quarterback. I think Josh Allen will get there, but Jalen Hurts already racked up 2. I mean, he needs 20. I don't see him getting that many, but you get 2 a game, you're talking about 34. You don't expect this to happen that many games. So that was the big one we're watching as Allen and Hurts move up the list on the NFL all-time rushing TDs. Other than that, there weren't any real records by the Eagles that they were looking at, unless you want to count Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle for the Eagles, who got kicked out of the game. Maybe he set a record for the earliest ejection from an NFL game when he got kicked out before the game even started. What a dumb thing to do. There's a referee standing right by his shoulder, watched him do it. It's incredible. That was a game, good game. I mean, Philadelphia Eagles held off the Dallas Cowboys, and I didn't think much of Dallas going into the season, but they did look fairly good. They might be able to be respectable this year. We'll see. All right, the second game is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers, which is a game that was held in Brazil. And let me find that game here. The Chargers beat the Chiefs. I don't think a lot of people expected that. So the Chargers beat the Chiefs 27-21. This was a really good game, fun game to watch. The Chargers took off with an early lead and held on to it, even though it's one of those things with Kansas City. You kept expecting to see the Chargers falter, and I thought they were actually going to. At the end of this first half, when they mysteriously decided to take a delay of game and back themselves up 5 yards. I didn't understand that at all. They could have called a timeout. I know they're running the clock, but they had a chance to do something, kick a field goal possibly. They didn't have to go that far. And by doing that and ending up having to punt to Kansas City was able to get a field goal before the end of the half. It was really a strange series of downs for the Chargers because I really thought they were trying to be aggressive. They seemed to be aggressive for most of the game, and then all of a sudden they pulled a stunt like that. I didn't understand what they were thinking there. But in the end, they did come through, and instead of just trying to run, and which you've seen teams do before against Kansas City, they'll try to run as if they're running the clock out, and then they just 3 downs and they're punting again. In Kansas City, it doesn't take them much time to score. But in this game, the Chargers didn't do that. And Herbert, the end of the game, had that long run to cement the game. Kansas City had run out of timeouts. They couldn't do anything to stop the clock. It was a big play. He ran, I think it was 19 yards. It was a big game. Good game, too. Another divisional game. So the Chargers now are 1-0. At home, that was a home game, even though it was in Brazil, it's considered a home game for the Chargers. So they're 1-0 at home, and they're now 1-0 in the division, the opposite for the Chiefs. So it's a good start. I actually picked the Broncos to win this division. So we'll see, but it's a good start if you're the Chargers. And obviously it helps out Denver too that the Chiefs lost. All right. So let's look at some of the numbers for Kansas City in this game. Now, here's another game. Like I was saying before, Patrick Mahomes threw for 258 yards, 24 out of 39, 24 completions with 39 attempts, had 1 touchdown. He was sacked twice, and honestly, he could have been sacked more, but he did rush the ball 6 times for 57 yards, led the team in rushing with 57 yards. Checo had 5 rushes for 25 yards, so only rushed the ball as a team 17 times, and 6 of them were by Patrick Mahomes. They were constantly trying to pass the game, and it was, again, got down to they did have a couple of big plays, that long pass, couple of long passes to Brown and Kelsey, but the rest of them were just the dink and dunk type of things that we've been seeing before. I will say Mahomes made a couple of incredible plays as usual, but Herbert wasn't alone. He also was there to win this game, and he played it just as good. But Mahomes made a play where you thought he was going to be sacked, and he passes it forward for a first down. It was quite a play, but he had to. He was running for his life, it seemed like, the entire game. Like I said, he was sacked only twice, and you would have thought it could have been many more times. He was pressured the entire game just about. So like I said, Mahomes led the team in rushing. That probably doesn't happen that often. Now, as far as receiving, it was Brown, 10 catches for 99 yards. So less than 10 yards of reception. One of them was for 49 yards. So honestly, he had 9 receptions then for 50 yards. Not much going on there. Just over 5 yards a catch for the rest of them. Smith-Schuster had 5 for 55. Those were the only 2 that had more than even 2 receptions. Kelsey had 2, but one of them was that critical touchdown for 37 yards. There was a couple plays where you wondered how the Chargers, what happened to their defense. The catch by Brown, where was the defense? And Kelsey was all alone over there on the side for that 37-yard touchdown. I don't know what the defense was thinking there, but they still hung on and won. Chargers, that is. So those are your 2 big players. And again, this is a game, like I said, where Mahomes, as a quarterback, led the team in rushing. So now we look at the last team, the Chargers. Herbert, and this was, I think, what won them the game. It was very unexpected, I think, by most people. He had 25 out of 34 attempts, 25 completions out of 34 attempts for 318 yards. They came out of the gate throwing the ball. I was really surprised. I think everybody was surprised. Threw the ball, they ended up having 25 completions and 25 rushing attempts. Now, Hampton did lead the team in rushing, 15 attempts for 48 yards, but Herbert ended up rushing 7 times himself for 32 yards. So you had 2 quarterbacks in out of the 4 teams that led the team in rushing, and Herbert was second in rushing this game. One of them was that critical 19-yard rush at the end of the game, with it coming up at the 2-minute mark, where he basically cemented the game, and Kansas City, like I said, had no timeouts and wrapped the game up. He really played well. So he had a good game. Now, the big receiver here were both Allen and McConkey. He did spread the ball around pretty good, but Keenan Allen still looked good. He knows how to find the open spot. 7 receptions for 68 yards, and he had 1 touchdown. And he was the go-to guy for Herbert when it came to first downs. He had 6 first downs. So really a good game for him. Now, McConkey also had a good game, 6 receptions for 74 yards. And then Quentin Johnston had 5 for 79, and Hampton out of the backfield had 2 for 13 yards. So Hampton ended up touching the ball 17 times in this game. Only had 15 attempts for 48 yards, so only a 3.2 average. His longest was 11 yards. It's his first game. Kansas City does have a good defense, so, I don't know what to expect. I don't expect, again, that necessarily the Chargers in their next game come out passing the way they did, but Herbert really has a beautiful pass. You could see, I think he really loved the idea that they were letting him loose and letting him throw the ball more than I expected. And he really, like I said, had a good game. So now when we're looking at these 2 teams, as far as stats go, they're really Kansas City. We'll go with the Chargers. Interesting here, the Chargers, this is now a team record that they're working on, but Keenan Allen's 10th all-time in scoring for this team. Now, remember, he played earlier. He was away a year. He came back. But right now he's 10th, and Cameron Dicker, their kicker, is 11th. So they went into the game with a 7-point gap, but Keenan Allen did have a touchdown. So he ended up with 370 points scored in his career with the Chargers, and Cameron Dicker had 9 points, so he's up to 366. So those 2 are going to be fighting it out. Obviously Keenan Allen's not going to hold off the kicker, because kicker's going to score. We've had 9 in this game. He's going to score every game. And Keenan Allen's not going to have a touchdown every game. But that's something to watch. Now, for the Chiefs, they didn't have anything change except for the fact that Patrick Mahomes continued to up his lead all time for the team in passing yards and TDs, both of which he obviously had 258 yards passing, and he had another TD. So he continues to move up there. And the same goes with Kelsey. Only had 2 receptions, but he just increased his lead in receptions. He's up to 1,006 receptions in his career. And he upped his receiving yardage and his TDs, up to 78 TDs now. Still a long ways from any type of NFL lead, even as far as tight ends go. There's players with over 100 touchdowns. So those were the leaders on that team. Nobody really that stood out particularly as far as that goes, but it is fun to watch the Keenan Allen as he is able to hang on there. And the really good one is in the first game, like I said, with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, is they just run the ball so much that we're going to see them ultimately break Cam Newton's record at some point. All right. So let's look at some of the stats now when we're looking at the fantasy stats here. Let me get my thing up here. Sorry about that. All right. Now, again, a lot of this had to do with the rushing, but Justin Herbert had a good game. He had almost 28 points, fantasy points in this game. Really a good game for him. So we're just looking at the leaders right now. Patrick Mahomes had 26, Jalen Hurts 24. Those 3 quarterbacks were your top 3 quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts really only he had those 2 rushing touchdowns. It was his rushing game that saved him as far as fantasy points, but that's why you pick him up, because of that. I think Justin Herbert's a surprise with 28 fantasy points to be leading right now going into the slew of games that come up Sunday and then on the one game on Monday. So those 3 quarterbacks are leading it. Quentin Johnston has almost 20 points he had with his game there with a touchdown. And then Javonte Williams is running back. Now, his game was also saved. He didn't have a lot of yards, but he did have a couple of touchdowns rushing. So that was really something that saved him in that game. Looking at that game here real quick again. He just, like I said, 15 carries for 54 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns. So really good for him. Had 2 catches as well, which obviously helps. And now these numbers I'm reading are always PPR. That's really all I play. Keenan Allen had almost 13. And if you had Travis Kelce, fortunately for you, he only had 2 receptions, but luckily one of them was a touchdown, which saved his game. He had almost 11. He had 10.7 points there. So those are your leaders currently. CeeDee Lamb had 11 points. Like I said, his case now was he was able to rack up, 100 yards, over 100 yards receiving, but no touchdowns. So, and he had a chance to, but that's where he stands. Fortunately, if you're in a league like mine, PPR with 110 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns, it's not bad. But that's where he stood. Actually, I'm sorry. He had 18 points. What am I saying? CeeDee Lamb had 18. That makes more sense. 11 receptions and 110 yards. 7 receptions, 110 yards. So he had 18 points. But overall, those are the top 9 players. Saquon Barkley had 18.4. And again, he had a rushing touchdown. Only had 60 yards, but still that touchdown saved him. And we can usually count on him on a touchdown there. And then again, he also had 4 receptions, which really helped him get up there. Now, 18 is not where you want to see Saquon Barkley, and I don't expect him to be held to 60 yards next week. That was a tough game. Dallas really came out looking to stop him, and they did a good job of that. But Hurts had a really good game and pulled him out. So those are some of your leaders. Really, it was a good game. It was a fun game to watch. Oh man, I keep losing my game. Here we go. All right, so that's your players. We'll be looking at the NFL stats after this game. Obviously, we only had 2 games, so the NFL leaders right now, it's going to be the same one of those 4 players. So we'll wait another game here before we get into who's the leaders and stats and so forth. But all right, that is a wrap for that game. Be looking forward to all the games on Sunday. I just wanted to get this one out real quick just to give it a shot. I'll have my act a little bit better. I'll have my act together a little bit better for the next one. But anyway, that is a wrap for this episode, and I'll be talking to you again after the Sunday games. All right. You can check me out on YouTube at Just the Stats NFL and subscribe, or appreciate that. Same with Facebook, X, Instagram, email, all at Just the Stats. Email is at justthestatsnfl at Google at gmail.com. Sorry about that. It's late. But anyway, I appreciate you listening, and until next time, I am out.